so the world can watch me burning for you.
Take a moment and talk to God as you have just asked that He set you on fire, that it is your desire to be seen, to be salt, to be light, to make a difference, to crave Him, to long Him, to have Him as your desire. Holiness, holiness is what I long for. Holiness is what I need. Holiness, holiness is what you want from me. Sing holiness, holiness, holiness is what I long for. Holiness is what I need. Holiness, holiness is what you want from me. Make this your song, sing holiness. Holiness, holiness is what I long for. Holiness is what I need. Holiness, holiness is what you want from me. So tell Him to take your heart. Take my heart and form it. Take my mind, transform it. Take my will, conform it to yours, oh Lord, to yours, oh Lord. The Lord is also seeking faithfulness from us. Faithfulness, faithfulness is what I long for. Faithfulness is what I need. Faithfulness, faithfulness is what you want from me. So take my heart, take my heart and form it. Take my mind, transform it. Take my will, conform it to yours, oh Lord, to yours, oh Lord. Righteousness, righteousness, righteousness is what I long for. Righteousness is what I need. Righteousness, righteousness is what you want from me. Take my heart, Lord, and form it. Take my heart and form it. Take my mind, transform it. Take my will, conform it. Take my heart, Take my heart and form it. Take my mind, transform it. Take my will, conform it. One more time, take my heart. Take my heart and form it. Form it. Take my mind, transform it. Take my will, conform it to yours, oh Lord, to yours, oh Lord, to yours, oh Lord, to yours, oh Lord. Only to you, God, to yours, oh Lord.
Take my heart one more time.
Take my heart and form it. Take my mind, transform it. Take my will, conform it to yours, oh Lord.
The song says, take my heart and form it, and take my mind, transform it. And then it says, take my will and conform it to yours. That's deep. That's really deep. You're giving up everything about you and asking God to do what he pleases with you. Thank you, worship team. You may be seated. Good. Let me say good evening to everyone here in the building and to those viewing us via YouTube. Welcome to another Wednesday night of Bible study. We've had, I believe, an interesting discussion thus far on going beyond the limitations, and we've been focusing on going beyond the limitations with self. Just to run through some of what we discussed last week, the quick definition of going beyond is to do more than which is expected or required. And limitations, it comes from the word limit, which means something that bounds, restrains, or confines a person or something. Going beyond self. He said we would address a few things, and one of the things that we had started addressing last week was, who am I? Am I what people see I am? Perception. From what or whose lens am I looking from? What does God see about you? And the other things that we said that we'd address is the I can't aspect in our walk with God, and past hurts and unforgiveness, going beyond self. Who am I? We ran through that last week, and tonight we want to focus on the I can't aspect. I can't means to be unable to do something. How many of us have said we can't? This Bible study is interactive, so we're talking to each other. How many of us have said that we can't. We all guilty of it, right? We're known for it. We're known for it, especially if it is something that pushes us outside of our comfort zone. I know I have said I can't several times. not because that I didn't have the ability to do it, but because I just didn't want to do it because it was getting me outside of my comfort zone. And if we were to be honest with ourselves, many a times we tell God, I can't, God, because we know that when it comes to God, it moves us outside of our comfort zone. It moves us and it pushes us to break barriers and norms and habits that we've never broken before. So the easiest thing to do or the easiest thing to say is, in response to the command or to the request, is that I can't. Because it's safer in the I can't area. We feel much safer saying we can't. And I am reminded of many stories in the Bible. And we spoke about him, but we'll come back to him. He was threshing wheat in a wine press. That's Gideon. He is in the wine press, threshing wheat, and God, the word that is used here in theological terms is a theophany, meaning God present. It says the angel of the Lord, but it was God himself, came down and spoke directly to Gideon while Gideon was in the wine press. And God says to Gideon, you are a mighty man of valor. You will go on and you will conquer the enemies because I am going with you. And Gideon's response is, you forget where I come from? Did you happen to forget who my people are? And I'm not the first, I'm not the second, I'm not the third. I am the least of the tribe. I cannot do this. I'm not made for this. I'm not built for this. And then we think about Jeremiah. Jeremiah says, Lord, I am but a youth. I am only a child. How do you expect me to go speak on behalf of your people and be a representation of you on behalf of your people? I am young. I'm too young for this. And God says, I will give you what to say. I will speak for you. I'll give you what to say. Moses says, but God, but God, you can imagine in his argument with God saying, but God, you don't have a speech impediment. And in our local language, you know as big A. You know, I stutter God, and you want me to go speak on your behalf? And God says, go and tell Pharaoh is the I am that sent you. And so let my people go. There are many instances of many other stories that we can find in Scripture that where God was speaking to his people and giving them commands, and their immediate response was, I am incapable of doing it. And I hope we have the roaming mics, but part of the reason why they said they could not do it is because of fear. They were afraid of what would have happened to them, particularly Moses. Moses was part of Pharaoh's family, and now you're telling me, God, I have to now go and tell Pharaoh, you said to let your people go? I have to now do this? You forget that it's these people that raised me? You forget it's they that clothed me? Did you happen to forget that when I should have died, they were the ones who saved me? And I can imagine God responding to Moses and said, but I was the one who set it up that way so that you, even while you did not know it, I was the one who set it up that way so that they would find you in the river. I specifically structured it that way so that it could happen that way, so that you would be in the right position at the right time when I needed you. Esther also comes to mind. Esther says to her cousin, Mordecai, it cannot be me. It cannot be me. I cannot be the one to go and speak to the king, even as the queen. You know, if I go to him without permission, he will kill me. That's the law of the land. If I'm not invited, even as the queen, even in my position, if I'm not invited and get there, he can easily say, put me to death. Fear. An unpleasant and often strong emotion caused by anticipation or awareness of danger. She thought about what could have happened to her and the possibility of the king putting her to death. Moses thought about Pharaoh and the consequences. You know, we always hear the saying, I've heard the older people say that, do not bite the hand that feeds you. So you can imagine Moses coming back to Pharaoh and say, Pharaoh, God said to let my people go. And Moses, in the whole process of the conversation with God, must be saying, you want me to go and tell the man who raised me up to now let your people go. You didn't think about what could possibly happen to me? Fear. Because he thought, in all of that, he thought that something would happen to him. Many a times God gives us requests. God gives a command. And the first thing we think about as human beings, as his children, is what could possibly happen to me in that moment if I were to go there, God? Not the fact that God says to Moses, I am sent you, and that I will be with you. Not the fact that God said to Jeremiah that I will give you the words to say, do not worry about that. Not the fact for Esther that she was assured that God would take care of her. Eventually, though, all these people get to the place where they are dressed and they do what God asked them to do. But many a times as God's children, we are stuck, present day, as children of God, stuck because we look for all the plausible excuses that we can find before we say yes to God. Can we get a roaming mic to Brother JB, please? Fear. I mean, I can use myself as an example. I remember, and I've said that several times here. I remember going to Bible school. In Bible school, in the first year of Bible school, I am crying to my parents that I do not want to be in Bible school. Bible school is not for me. I want to be an accountant. And I've had people throughout that first year come and say to me, before you leave here, you will be preaching. You will be a preacher. And I looked at them and I laughed. I laughed because I never thought it possible for me to be a preacher. I mean, I grew up as a pastor's child. So my experience, though some of it was good, some of it wasn't the best. So for me, I did not want to be one. And I remember in September of 2004, sitting in the pew far back. I come to church. I just make sure I go to church because I know the importance of having God in my life. So I go to church. But I don't need no involvement. I don't want involvement. And this person is done speaking this Sunday morning. And she says, there is somebody here in the audience, over 300 people sitting inside the church. And there's somebody here in the audience that God has been speaking to. And he has been calling you. And you have been saying no to him. And I'm in the back pew and I'm shaking because I can hear God saying, it's you. And I tell God, no, it cannot be. Not today. I tell you no already. I told you no because, God, I had seen. I have had enough experience to know that this thing is not for me. And I remember being in the back, shaking, and the next thing I know, I was at the front and saying yes. Yes to God. And my pastor said, we were just waiting. We knew it, and we were just waiting. But I've had my moments of fear as well. Because I felt like this couldn't be for me. Why me, God? Why not somebody else? Because the first thing we think of as human beings is to think of what could possibly happen if we stand up for what God wants us to stand up for. We think about the consequences before we think about the blessing. We think about the consequences before we think about the benefit of what it means to our relationship with God. Brother JB.
Thank you. I'm following your point, and it is correct what you're saying, that most of the times it's fear that causes us to really hide in a corner, and that is true. But I'm looking at two examples with youth, with Jeremiah, and also with, I think it was Elijah, the first prophet, what is the name again? But with Jeremiah, he was saying that he's just a child. And from a child's point of view, a child is just a child. Don't really have the information, don't really have what it takes. But he's checking himself as he's just a child. Unlike the adult who is matured in life, like Moses and the others, they knew what could befall them. So really fear was there. But for the child, I see it in a different form. Also with this young child, he was given a message by God to give to Eli. That is Samuel. Samuel at an early age, God came and spoke to him and tell him about all what he was going to do. He was afraid, but the fear that was in him was not for himself. He was concerned about what would happen to Eli when Eli heard that kind of message that God is passing there to him. So the children, the youth, I see it in a different form.
But may I ask you, as you say that, don't you think somewhere in Samuel's mind that he has to bring that kind of message to Eli? This is what God is saying to you, and I have to be the one to carry it to you. You don't think there was some bit of fear to carry that message to him?
Yeah, but I'm looking at from a child's point of view who had never been involved because he never knew God before, and that is the first time he had encounter. As a matter of fact, when God called him 3 times, and he was not even aware that it was God that was calling him. It's Eli who told him, go back and lie down. And because he realized that it's God that was calling the child. So he was not in that realm yet of knowing God and what God wanted. Now that God revealed himself and his word, he was afraid to say it to Eli because he figured that is going to do something to Eli. So there was a fear, but not like the fear of how Moses and them had it. You know, I'm still saying there was fear when God calls us to do something. But I'm seeing that in a different form with those two young boys. One saying, I'm just a child, you know, and really he was a child. And the other one was concerned what would have happened to the prophet. You know, when he tell him, but it's the prophet that to help him to say, don't be afraid. If he tells you something, don't be afraid. Tell me everything that he see. So that really helped him, and then he spoke the word to Eli. So fear is yes, like you said, but with the children, it is from a different format. That's what I understand from that.
At the end of it, it's still fear. It still remains fear. Whether it is different from the perspective of the child, it is still fear. Because everybody deals with fear differently from where they are. So the child is dealing with his fear from where he is. He doesn't anticipate the kind of danger or doesn't think about major consequences as you would think as an adult, because you see things from a different perspective. Because you're a bit more mature, you have experienced some more things than he has, but doesn't mean that he doesn't have fear. And I think that is what you were alluding to, that they all, at the end of it all, is all fear. My brother, let's look at another word. When you think about I can't, failure. A lack of success or the inability to meet an expectation. Go ahead.
So I think even Jesus Christ experienced some level of fear when he was going to face the crucifixion, when he was crying on God, let this cup pass from me. I think in my mind, I think he experienced a level of fear that he didn't want to do it, but he wanted to do it, fulfill his Father's will. What is your view on that?
Passive.
I wouldn't categorize Jesus' experience as fear. It is the weight of the
job that he had to
do. That burden is tough. Humanly, I can't do this, right? But permit me to go back a little bit to the fear of Pastor Lester, because I'm thinking that personalities differ and respond quite differently.
And before I get where you're going, but I think I'm coming to that. So when we get there, maybe you can give a little more insight in that area. Failure, the lack of success, or the inability to meet an expectation. Going beyond says to do more than what is required or expected. I want you to get that. Going beyond says to do more than what is required or expected. Failure states the inability to meet an expectation. And so I'll pose the question, whose expectation? Because life experiences and things that can happen to us, we can deem it as failure. And I will use myself as an example. I remember taking up church pastoring when my dad died in 2010. I had no pastoral experience. I just had a degree in theology coming from seminary and just ministered. I've ministered at different churches, but never had any experience in pastoring. I stepped in a month or so after my dad died, or even less, days after my dad died. I was buried. I stepped in, took up the responsibility of a church, not knowing what was required of me to do in the moment, but I stepped to it because there was a need, and I went in with no experience. And then through that experience while pastoring, I got married. And a few years later, I am going through a divorce while pastoring a church. And I felt in that moment that I failed God, I failed the ministry, and I failed myself. Because I am asking myself, why me, and what did I do? Because I had an expectation when I walked in. There was an expectation that I placed on myself, or what I thought pastoring a church would be like. Not understanding different personalities, not fully understanding the different mindsets, not clearly understanding where the people were and what they were taught. And I will tell you, sometimes breaking people out of what they were taught when you are younger than them, to help them, to teach them, it can be very challenging. So I went through that process. I went through that, and I'm like, I felt like I failed God. Because the next thought was, how do I then, after I get divorced, stand in front of people to preach again? What are people thinking or saying about me? What am I saying about myself? Because there's an expectation. When you hold certain positions, there's an expectation. Whose expectation? Is it man's expectation or God's expectation? How is it the weight of it, or how do you wait? Do you wait based on what God says, or do you wait based on what the people around you see? Because there's always an expectation. People have an expectation. You have an expectation. And going beyond, for me, now in retrospect, I am now feeling that I did more than what was required of me. Because I took up something that I had no experience with. I was bold enough to step in it, not knowing enough what was required of me, but I took the challenge. I've learned a lot of lessons because of that experience. Back then, I saw it as a failure. Because, again, with the whole divorce, I have family members. I look at my parents, and today, if my dad was still alive, my parents would have been married for 41 years. My father's siblings were married for that amount of years as well. They all got married, them all got married around the same age, same time. So there's an expectation that I placed on myself, and I thought, if this doesn't work, then I am a failure. Pastor Randy.
Pastor Lester, you're raising a lot of issues there that is working through my mind with the definitions you have. And I'll go back to the personalities in a minute. But before that, let me take the last thing first. Mm-hmm. Who did you fail? Did God send you there? And you know what my position is on this, right? Did God send you there? Was it God who said you was going to pass after your father at Woodford Hill? And if God didn't say that, then you could not have failed God, right? Now, here is the issue that we're having, and you can turn that back and put the whole fear issue into the fear of failure. So you went to do this, and I am of the view, and I am not an authority on this, I am of the view that you did this because you were pressured by your daddy's expectation. And you did something that way. And you went to do it. And there is did you fail? Well, in my understanding of church and so on, I don't believe you failed. And I'm not trying to bother you here. I'm
Yeah,
trying
I
to look at the
understand.
situation as it is. So to even come to the place where you feel you failed yourself or you failed God, you have to first ask, did I fail? Did I enter into something that I shouldn't have entered? Was it a Jonah situation that I did? Right? Did God tell me to go and I mess it up? Right? Or did I go because I believe that my father would have wanted to do that, so I went to please my father. So what you did was that you went in there to satisfy, as it were, what your dad would have wanted. Or did God send you there for a particular season to experience that? So sometimes we look at limitations and we limit ourselves with the limitations, right? Because we fail to ask ourselves the questions. And hearing, I go to the question of the personality and the fear. The Apostle Paul. The Apostle Paul is the sharp contrast of Moses. Right? God speaks to Moses. Moses wants confirmation, second confirmation, third confirmation, and he still don't want to go. God speaks with Paul. Or, like Paul says it, sometimes it's Paul sensing something, and he does it with dispatch. And later on, Paul says, boy, the care of the churches. It's almost like you feel Paul is saying, did I do that right? Right? Examining himself again. So his, I don't want to call it fair. I don't even know what it is. His looking back at himself at that point is, what if Ephesus doesn't do well? So he writes to the church in Galatia and he says, John B must be an all human. For all what I think I have done, I've worked hard, I've toiled and so on, and all you still so dotish. Somebody must have suki all you. I'm trying to make the King James word come alive. You must be bewitched. And I think it's Paul asking himself, what happened there? Where did I go wrong? You fellas were doing good, and he actually says so. Somebody fooled you. Right? And then here comes for the minister, the feeling that, wow, where did I go wrong? What did I do? Right? That's going to cause this to fall. Some of us as ministers, we have that spirit. So the devil don't scare us. We go and we get it done. And then when it's done, and you have some quiet time, or God gives you a moment of introspection in hindsight, and you ask, what did I just do? And now you are fearful that it's going to fall down. Right? I think that I'm thinking of those personalities while you're talking. I'm thinking of Peter, for example. Peter is a hot-blooded guy who acts on impulse. Jesus, all the disciples say, Jesus, if it is you, all the disciples say, there's a ghost on the water. Peter says, fast forward, guy, if it's you, bid me to come with you. And Jesus said, comes. Peter does what? He goes. Yeah. And in the process, he gets fearful. But he made the first step. He walked on the water. If you check the scriptures, he actually walked on the water. But while he was walking, he got fearful. He looked at the waves around him. Sometimes our fear comes after we tackle the job. That's what I'm trying to say. And maybe the personalities come into play there.
Thank you. I like some of the in terms of the engagement. Did I go because God sent me? Or was I fulfilling somebody else's desires for me? And there are a lot of people who are doing things because of the expectation of others. And if we really want, and when we operate, let me say this first, when we operate in what people expect of us, we never fulfill that which God says for us. Because we are always living in what Brother JB says that I'm supposed to be. And until we break from that and break from the shadow or the hold, might I say, of Brother JB or Brother JB's influence on us, until we break from that, we will not see our full potential. Because we are living based on what Brother JB says. And there's a lot of people in church who have potential to become, but living based on what somebody else thinks or says, or the person's expectation of them. What if I decide to break out of the expectation? What if I decide to push myself beyond, go a little further? Remember I said after Sister Octavia preached on Sunday, I said, when I was doing the altar call, I say, sometimes you have to push you. Go beyond you. Because sometimes it's not anybody else. Sometimes the thing that holds you back the most is you. You can be your biggest hindrance. You can hold you back from where God wants to take you. And until you decide that I have had enough here and I want more, no matter how much I come and tell you that you need to get over there to experience more, unless you take the step to get there, you will never experience it. But are you living in somebody else's expectations? Is it that what they say weighs or has so much more weight than everybody else? Does it have more weight than what God says? Yeah? Think about that. Does that person's influence has more weight than what God says? And if that person's influence has more weight than what God says, then you need to check yourself. I like this saying, who has your ears has your heart. Because that's who will have the greatest influence on you. So failure. Am I basing this based on, did I do what I do because God said it? Or did I do it because I was trying to fulfill somebody else's expectation of me? How do I weigh failure? Then there is intimidation. To make timid or fearful, to compel. What or who intimidates you? Because, interestingly, there are a lot of people who will not do certain things in church because they're intimidated by the person leading the department or leading the church. I mean, I'll be honest. It took some adjusting to be able to deal, I can say, personalities to understand how you operate as senior pastor. I had to adjust because there were times when I was seriously intimidated by you and by your presence. Until I understood your way of thinking and your way of doing things. But that came to the point of spending time with you and understanding how you operate. And that caused me to break out of that so that I can become even better at what I do. Sometimes we look at people based on where we are. And so because of where we are, we think that the person thinks of themselves better than us. Whereas the person is more than willing to take you under their arms and help you Sometimes intimidation is not the person that intimidates you. Sometimes it's you, because of where you are, you see that person as somebody who's intimidating. And some people will not do things. They will not participate. They will not push themselves to be a part because they perceive that that person is tough. They perceive that that person is hard. Or they go based on what somebody else tells them. How many times people have not spoken to you because of what somebody else said? Because somebody else said it. Somebody else said, Mister. Let me give you an example. A few weeks ago at work, somebody did something that they were not supposed to park in an area they were not supposed to park. Now, when I come in, or any of the other drivers, we come into the health centers, we park there because we always have to offload or load. Now, I come in and I have my duties. I went to see my supervisor and I have things for me to do. But because you're a nurse and you park there, you expect that I move because you say to move. But in the first place, you were not supposed to park there. And because you have position, sometimes people can operate like that they have position, so they try to intimidate you because of their position. And my response to the situation was, were you not told not to park there? Yes. So you will have to wait until I am done doing my duties. And called me arrogant. And then one of the person says, Mister? I can't be Mister you're talking about. Not this pastor there, not him. No, it cannot be. Mr. Not arrogant, Mr. Not full of himself. That's the most humble person you can meet. That's what was her response. And I was like, oh, wow. But again, perception. How people perceive you. How people see you. Some people will use their authority to intimidate you, while others will see something else from you. What is your response to? If God gives you an assignment and God says that God gives you with the ability to sing, and you have the passion for worship and you're involved. But something about Carrie scares you. And Carrie, not even the worship leader. She's not in charge. And so because Carrie on the worship team, Nigel decides that he's not joining the worship team. It's not that Nigel doesn't have the ability to sing. But because that person is on the worship team, I will not go, because there's something about them that I perceive that is intimidating to me. Not necessarily that there's anything, but because I have developed my own thoughts about who that person is without getting to know them, I will stay in my seat even after I know that I have the ability to do, and there's need for me to be part of it and to be instrumental in it. But because I have a perception of somebody in the group, I'll not join the group. Brother Gage.
Ask, is it right or correct to say that there's a thin line between fear and intimidation? Or we sometimes mix it up, confuse it? Because you might be intimidated by somebody or somebody, but yet in yourself, you feel in a fear, you feel fearful. So is it,
Well, the definition say to make timid or fearful. So it's right there in the definition. But sometimes we are the ones who are holding ourselves back from exploring all that God wants to show us. because we look at something or we look at somebody and we make an assumption about them without getting to know them, without building a bond, without... Pastor Randy, you're going to say something. Brother Gage?
On what Gage said, because it's important for us to understand the words in the way that they're used. Fear is really an output of the individual. So the person gets fearful. Intimidation is used from the perspective of what somebody else wants to put on you. So somebody else wants to make you fearful, right? But fear, you are the person getting fearful. You know what I mean?
Yes.
So I want to intimidate you, or you think that I'm intimidating you. Now, that action really sometimes it's me, and I think you very well gave both examples. So there are people who want to show their authority to intimidate you. But there are people whom you get intimidated by because of presence,
Yeah.
because of their personality, their whatever the case is. In every case, though, it is somebody either using their power or inadvertently causing you to be fearful, if I may use it in that text. But it's always the other individual who's getting fearful. I think, if we put in that context, we understand the relationship between the intimidation and fear.
Okay. Any other questions, emotional outbursts we engage in? Brother Paul has something he wants to say, and then we'll go to Brother Nigel.
Okay, Pastor Lester. How can someone get over that situation?
Overcoming that situation, like the one I used with, say, Kerry and Nigel, right? Or Nigel and Daisy, or even me wanting to come to join the worship team, right? I believe what I think one must do in order to overcome that fear is to get to confront the actual fear that you have and get to know the person. Come to the person, have a conversation with the person, and get to know the individual. And once you get to know the individual, then you start having a different understanding, a different perspective, because you push yourself to get to know the person. And you start seeing the person in a different light. You start understanding that, hey, but wait, that's not who that person really is. That was an assumption from me looking afar off. Now that I'm close off to the person, I get to understand that there is more to the person than that meets the eye. Pastor Randy.
I'm sorry for dominating your Bible study tonight, Pastor Lester. But I think it's very interesting, the areas that you bring it out, really and truly, right? Because if we think through it, we need to dig a little deeper, okay? There are two things I've always said that I've learned long ago. Nobody can stress me out, or nobody can intimidate me. Because in either case, I am the person making the decision, not you. Right? Now, what do I do is that I tell myself, I know who I am. You can have 3 doctorates, 16 master's degrees. And you can say all of them, Sister Octavia, in a whole long introduction. When you finish that, you are no better to me, in my eyes, than somebody who just came in and speak. In other words, whatever you say about yourself does nothing to me. Why? Because I know who I am. And I think it's time that people get to the place where they develop self-confidence. That's not pride, eh? Self-confidence. I was talking to somebody this morning, and he is well-accomplished engineer. Brought me to see a project yesterday of some magnitude that I can't fathom. Looked at the drawing, and I began to say, now I understand this. And he looked at me and said, wait a while, are you an architect? I said, no, I just understand drawings. Now, He has the whole works. That doesn't mean that I couldn't enter his office and have a conversation with him. Why? Because I know who I am. We have to get to the place where we are so confident before knowing or not knowing to say, excuse me, you spoke about that word intimidation. What does that mean? And I all of a sudden deal with my intimidation. I don't fear that anymore. Whoever you are, I want you to know that we can have a conversation. Even if I don't understand half of the lingo, I'm going to ask you to break it down, right? It's just like stress. People get stressed over people's status. And I was just sharing with my wife today that I laugh because that for me is a reflection of who you are.
Yeah.
It has nothing to do with me. You're just telling everybody in the world who you are. And anybody who have sense in their head know if you have to always rant and rave on status, boy, you're a little baby who have a serious problem. You need to see a doctor. No, that's what I laugh at it. We have to come to the place, all of us, where we stand up and say, no, you can't intimidate me. That's why the devil intimidates us, Because he makes some shouting and then we just go in our corner. Because we do not know who we are. And I think it's time that Christians get to the place where you get to know who you are. I don't have to shout my name for you to know I'm here. I don't have to make noise about it. And nobody should. You just do what you have to do because you are called to do it. If the Lord called you to pray, pray. If He called you to sing, just sing. And if nobody asks you to sing, go and practice with the worship team and sing a solo. And then they will know you can sing. But don't make noise about it and put it on your status, nobody called me to sing or nobody called me to preach. So what did you have? There's one way that you had to overcome your intimidation. And again, it's because of the type of leader that the Lord has given us. So I see people and my job is to make you better than me. And that's why I don't know why people get intimidated with people. My job is to make you better than me. Now, if that's my theme, you can intimidate me if you get better than me. Can't frighten me. You can't make me feel away because my job is to make you better than I. Because I believe I am just here for a season in your life, and I must look back and say, that was my student. And that's a proud moment for me. And we have to change that about us. Thanks for giving me the chance.
And thanks for sharing. Brother Nigel, I'll come to you, Brother JB.
Yeah, Pastor, as we're discussing the topic of fear, could we say that is what that's my thoughts, but it could tie in with the flesh being carnally minded and not spiritually minded?
That is, I believe, is twofold. It has to do with where you are in terms of your relationship with God. Repeat the question again, because I want to make sure I ask your question again, so I make sure I correctly answer you.
So let me we're discussing fear. And I just thinking of the flesh. Yeah, when the flesh, you want to let us about being carnally minded and not spiritually minded. For instance, you had the example there when you were intimidated. You said you were intimidated by a pastor. We're not getting to know him. You didn't spend time with him at the moment, and so at that point in time, would you say you were?
No, that has nothing to do with the flesh. That has to be with the presence that he carries. And if you don't know him, you don't know somebody and you see them, and depending on how they walk, how they carry themselves, you make an assumption about the person without even knowing them. That is because you've seen them from afar off versus a personal one-on-one interaction where it is, okay, that person is not what I assumed them to be or not what I thought them to be.
So you made the perception, and at that moment there, that moment when you made the perception, was that pleasing unto God? Was that pleasing unto God? You made the perception that, so that is the follow-up question, was that pleasing unto God?
Nigel, Brother Nigel, seeing somebody and developing a thought about the person doesn't make it wrong what you think about the person. You just see the person and you develop a thought without knowing the person. I could say because you are tall, you can run. Just looking at you, being tall, you can run. And next thing I find, you cannot really run. But there's something that I thought I developed about you. Is there something wrong with me thinking that about you?
I want you to understand me, Pass, because you, God push you to He order their steps. He orders our steps, so He ordered their steps to get to know Pastor Rodney, and so that pleased Him by the fact that you follow His direction. You didn't to say like you shy away, and you say no. You just have that perception in your mind. Oh, that is how He is. That is your fault. And I believe that that wasn't pleasing. It wasn't pleasing unto God, but the fact that you made He ordered your steps to get to know Pastor Rodney, I believe that is what that pleased God. If you had stayed away from Pastor Rodney, it wouldn't be pleasing unto God.
I think you're overthinking the thought too about what would be pleasing in that sense. But I don't know if Pastor Randy want to say anything on that.
You know the reason why it's just that just when I meditating, because I was led to Romans chapter right there, Romans 8. Romans chapter 8, and from verse 5. Let me bear with me. Yeah, Romans chapter 8. From verse 5. Let me read from verse 5. It says, "For those who live according to the flesh set their minds on the things of the flesh, but those who live according to the Spirit, the things of the Spirit. For to be carnally minded is death, but to be spiritually minded is life and peace." And the last verse, verse 7, "Because the carnal mind is enmity against God, for it is not subject to the law of God, nor indeed can be. So then those who are in the flesh cannot please God." So for my understanding of that, if you just decide, Pastor Lester, and you just decide, you make up your own mind that you're not getting to know Pastor Rodney, that is the perception you have of him, you wouldn't make the effort.
Let me tell you, I knew Pastor Randy already, and I was still intimidated by his presence. Context. Because he said something, just a minute, he said something about being sure and confident in yourself. And when you know yourself and you're sure, people, whether they are sure and whether they have that kind of influence, because you're sure about who you are, then you don't worry about what presence they carry, because you know who you are. The problem I had was lack of self-confidence. So it's not... Exactly. There's nothing fleshly or spiritual about it. Brother JB, you had...
A point you made a while ago, earlier on, and I believe it's very true. You were talking about confronting the fears so that you can overcome it and get rid of it. And I believe it is true, because we saw that with Gideon. God says to Gideon, "Go down secretly into the enemy's camp. And when you go down there, listen." Now, he could have said that the enemy, if I go there, that could have been, that might happen. But he obeyed, and he confronted the enemy's camp. He went down there. He confronted his fear. And when he went down there, he heard a conversation. And the conversation that he heard caused him to be strengthened and have confidence in himself and believe in God when God says, "You are a man of valor." He actually got up from where he was and he went into the enemy's territory. I just wanted to bring that out because you said that one must get up and face the consequences and approach the individual. That's what he did. When God told him, "Go, get up and go down there," he went and he confronted the territory of the enemy, and he came out victorious with that. I just wanted to say that.
There is something that I think is important for us to make in terms of the point there. And that links with the many Christians' belief about mental sickness. And I'm tying it because I think what Nigel was alluding to on the principle must be looked at from that perspective. We have to again come to the place where we understand that we cannot always draw a line of spirit and flesh in certain characteristics of the human person. So we cannot say, for example, that somebody who loses their mind is demon-possessed. Okay? Many things get involved in the whole question of intimidation, environment, how you grew up. A lot of what children, for example, and some of you are here will know that, when your parents spoke to you, when they vex you, they say, look at me when I'm talking to you. And then we look at them and say, don't look at me when I'm talking to you. What does that do to you, right? You get what I'm saying? You get to a place now where you don't even know how to look at your parents. You don't know when to look at them, when to look at them. And some children grow up with the spirit, with the personality that they can't even look at adults in the eyes because they don't know when to do that. No, that's not spiritual, ungodly, right? It is what happens in your environment, in your conditioning. That's why some of us, when we raise children, we have to know how we're raising our children. We raise our children to be rebellious, some of us. We raise our children to be too timid, the rest of us. We have to raise our children to be respectful. We have to raise our children to know that I can ask a question respectfully. I don't have to curse you to hear what you have to say. Because those are conditions that we set for them so that their minds, right, can now be strong. So when Paul says in the Romans that Nigel mentions, that we must renew our minds, right, we have to open up the discourse on renewing our minds. Okay? And those things come into play. What did I have to do with you? Sometimes I would see the way you feel intimidated before you even told me about it. So I introduced, say, Lester, listen, when you're preaching on the pulpit, preach. The pulpit is yours. The pastor is in the pew. He can't take the mic from you. So just preach like it's your pulpit. Why? Because coming from your background was that everything was intimidating. Right? And so we have to begin to learn those things so that we don't spiritualize, for want of a better word, somebody thinks that we just need to deal with as it is.
And we've heard some very salient points tonight. Quickly, I want somebody to turn to Deuteronomy 31:6. Get that scripture for me. And somebody else, Matthew 10:28 and Philippians 4:6 and 2 Timothy 1:7. Deuteronomy 31:6, Matthew 10:28, Philippians 4 and verse 6, and 2 Timothy 1:7. First person you have.
Deuteronomy 31:6, the Amplified Version,
Yes.
says, be strong and courageous. Do not be afraid or tremble in dread before them. For it is the Lord your God who goes with you. He will not fail you or abandon you.
Key points. Be strong and courageous. For the Lord, their God, it's your God. Possession, it's my God. Possessive, my God is with me. And that is the place that we need to get to and be reminded consistently that God is with you. So you can be strong and you can be courageous. You can face that which you thought was intimidating because you know that God is with you. That He promises He will never leave you, nor will He forsake you. You know how many times we quote that? And I think the problem for us is our belief system. We say it because, it sounds good. It's pretty, it's nice, everybody's saying it. We need to get to a place where we believe what we confess as it relates to the Word of God. He says that your God, is with you. So you have every right to be strong and to be courageous. Nothing or no one should intimidate you, and you should not be intimidated by anything or anyone, because God is with you. The other thing is that whatever season that you're going through in your life, you need to be reminded that He will never leave you, nor will He ever forsake you. So much people are telling you they love you. And when you really need them, and you pick up the phone, they're unavailable. The phone ringing out, you getting voicemail, it's just, the person you're trying to reach is unavailable. There is never a time that when you ask God to show up, that He's silent. So we need to adopt that, make that be part of us. Be assured that when you go to work, know that your God is with you. And not because, like Pastor said, the person has degrees above you and they get a higher paying salary than you, that you should, I'm not saying disrespect the person. That please don't go to your work and feel you can say what you want to your supervisor or the person in charge. What I'm saying is, be sure of who you are so they don't allow people to use you or intimidate you. Because the minute people know that you are easily intimidated, they will use you. Stand your ground as a child of God. Know who you are. Somebody else, Matthew 10:28. Read that for me, please. Who has Matthew 10:28? Matthew 10:28. Do not fear the one who can kill the body, but fear the one who can kill both the body and soul in hell. You know, many times we are more intimidated by man than we are with God. That we take our Father for granted. Like the kind of reverence we give people versus what we give God. And He says, do not fear the man that can just kill the physical body. He has the ability. And we can look at that from a different context, a different perspective, sorry. You can look at it from a different perspective in that if God gives you a command, He says, do not worry about the one that can kill your body. I am the one who can kill both body and soul. So why worry about a mere man? Do what I ask you to do. Because He has the authority. People can threaten you, and people will threaten you. People will say things. They will do things. They will try things. But you don't worry about them. Just tell them, your Father can kill both the body and soul. You worried about trying to hurt me. You worried about trying to destroy me. My Father can kill both the body and soul in hell. When you know, the point I'm making is that when you know whose you are, when you know who you are, I am a child of the King. I am the child of the King of Kings. I don't have no fancy surname. But you remember what I said last week when we were talking about who are you and how this scripture says in Psalms 139 that you were fearfully and wonderfully made, that He took His time and knit you together and designed you and made you just who you are? When you are sure of that, people will say and people will do. In this life, there will always be what we call haters. Always people that would try to despise you. Always people that will plot and plan against you. But when you understand who you are not intimidated by the presence of others. Quickly, Philippians 4, verse 6. Philippians 4, verse 6. Who has it? Read it for me, please.
Philippians 4, verse 6. Don't worry about anything, but in everything, through prayer and petition, with thanksgiving, present your requests to God.
Amen. Amen. What do you say to worry? What's that? When you worry, or when you're anxious, it brings stress. And stress brings depression. Stress raising your blood pressure. Stress causing your diabetes to be uncontrollable. That's from one word, worry. You take up the weight of the world on your shoulder. You're worried about what everybody else think or say about you. Hey, you're a child of God. That which you cannot handle, he says, cast all your cares upon me. Lay all your burdens. Come to me and just leave it there. Why do you think so many people, right now, when you look at the health center, a lot of people, their blood pressure high, their sugar high, they have this blood condition, they have this heart condition because they're stressed. They're worried. But God says that he will take care of everything that concerns you. That he'll take care of everything that concerns me. So I'm going to beat up myself for things that I have no control over. I used to worry about certain things and worry about, a few years ago I would worry about how my rent would have gotten paid when I didn't work for almost a year. And then when I saw how God just miraculously favored me and how he take care of me and had already positioned me years ago with a landlord that would be considerate, not knowing what would have come. I didn't know that was coming, but he shifted me from one place to another. And he placed me from being with an unsaved, I lived in an unsaved person's house, and then he puts me at a Christian, to rent at a Christian's place. But I didn't know that. I didn't know that he knew what was coming, but he knew. So he prepared everything, and I found favor with my landlord. So I saw God work. You think, no, I can go back and go and repeat the same thing and behave the same way? No, because I have now seen what God can do. I know what God can do. So now I don't stress. I don't want to take blood pressure tablet. Because you know what happens? Eventually your body gets used to it and it has actually no effect on your body. And then they want to change it and give you a higher one. And then give you another and that one. And instead of getting the situation. So why not just leave stress where it is? Stress is not mine. I do not accept stress. I do not worry because God says, do not worry. And that's the place we need to get to. That's the only places we need to get to in order to be able to, that situations don't come. When situations come up, whatever the situation is, because we are so assured of who we are in God and what our God is capable of doing, we don't panic. I get panic attack. I just say, Daddy, you see that? That there, I cannot deal with it. I do not know how to deal with it. It is yours. I trust you to take care of it. We need to have trust like Isaac had trust in Abraham. Isaac didn't flinch. Isaac stood there and said, Daddy, do what you have to do. I trust you. He raised the knife to kill him. And he didn't flinch. He didn't ask a question. The word of God says, be anxious for nothing. And I end with this. 2 Timothy 1:7, that it says that God has not given us a spirit of fear, but one of power, of love, and of a sound mind. Fear is not your possession. Repeat that with me, please. Fear is not my possession. Some people have fear like it's a property their parents leave for them. No, it's not your possession. It's not your future. It's just not yours at all. God says that I have given you a spirit of power, of love, and a sound mind. A sound mind. I'm always alert. I'm always aware of what is going on around me. I am powerful. I have power. I have the most powerful presence residing in me. Because God is residing in me. His spirit indwells me. So he doesn't give me a spirit of fear. I'm not intimidated because I know who I am and I know whose I am. So I'll not take fear as my own. It's not mine. Don't own things that God didn't say that wasn't yours. If he tells you it's not yours, leave it where it is. It's not yours, leave it there. Take what God says. And he says, be anxious for nothing. It says that I've given you a spirit of power, of love, and of a sound mind. That's what his word says. So, Sister Althea.
If the Bible tells us that God did not give us a spirit of fear, but at the same time it's saying, he said a lot of, he encamped around those who fears him. So that is what? Explain that.
The fear in that text is different. That fear is reverence. The fear in that text is to reverence God. That is not to be afraid of God, but to give him, to honor him, to respect him. Yeah. So the same word can be used, but has different meaning based on context. My sister Jonah.
What would you say about Elijah? Knowing that he's a person God worked so much with, he did so much with, and then he was running away from that queen because she had killed how many hundreds. What did you say
about that? That's a man that stood up against many men and one woman. The power of a woman. Again, her presence, she had something about her intimidated Elijah in that moment. And so he ran. She had a large group of people behind her and supporting her. And for some reason, he lost focus on what really mattered. He lost his focus that, wait, God just brought me and God did this for me. He forgot that for a minute. And he just looked at what was before him. And he felt that his flight, I have to run because if she hold me. He didn't even think about who he was in God at that moment. He just thought about if she catches me, what she will do to me. One woman. But fear is not yours, church. It's not your possession. It's not what God says for you. God says that you have a spirit of love, of power, and of a sound mind. Walk in the fact that you have a sound mind. Walk in the fact that you have presence. And there is a greater presence that resides in you. Greater is he that is within me than he that is in the world. He resides in you. And he makes you victorious. He says that you are the head and not the tail. You are above and not beneath. That's who you are. You are royalty, which we mentioned. You are chosen. We mentioned that last week. You are God's own special possession. Walk in that and don't let anybody intimidate you or cause you to fear or tremble. Because if God is for you, nobody can stand against you. Next week, when we come back, I was hoping that we'd touch on that, but we wanted to deal with this aspect of going beyond self, in that of past hurts and unforgiveness. Thanks again to those who viewed us, listened, participated, every one of you tonight for your questions, your outbursts, all of that. Thank you. We look forward to having you on Sunday morning at 9:15 for Encounter with God, where again, you will have an encounter with God. Thank you and God bless you. Good night. Let us stand, church. Okay. All right. I'm going to ask Sister Nadia to close us up in prayer.
Gracious and Heavenly Father, I thank you for this night that you have given us. Thank you, Daddy God, that we could come in to your house to learn more about you, to go beyond our limitations, Daddy God. Daddy God, I thank you for the manservant. Thank you for giving him wisdom, that he could come and teach us, Daddy God. I thank you, Daddy God. And as we are about to leave, Daddy God, I pray that you go before us. In Jesus' name I pray.